And hello, good afternoon, Facebook family. Tony T coming to you here from Laguna Beach. I'm going to try this again here. Give it a couple of moments for some folks to join us. Give you something pretty to look at here. Pretty amazing. And the water's coming up really close. Interesting day here today. Juan, welcome. Glad you're here, buddy. I'm going to give it a couple of moments here for some folks to join us, and until then, I'm going to give you some beautiful beach waves. Kind of ties into what I want to share with you here today. Just give it a moment. Yeah. You can see why I enjoy coming out here. Just give it another couple of seconds here for some other folks to join us. I'd announced I was going to be doing this. I didn't say what time I'd be going live with it, so just figured I would do it when the moment hits me. Just kind of what I felt like. Ooh, here comes a big one. Yeah, this ocean here can be kind of sneaky. If you're not careful, waves will come up and catch you real quick. So what I love about this beach is that it is oftentimes very, very different every time I come out here. Every time I come out here, it's just a different type of landscape. Matter of fact, this time last year, right up here, you could see this was all like, there was no sand. Matter of fact, all the way up to here, it was just complete drop off. These rocks that are here, it was just completely dropped off here. There's so much sand that has been swept up in the past year up to this area that it's a completely different landscape. And, you know, I ask myself, I say, well, why is that? You know, because every time I come out here, it seems to be different. Like even on a weekly and daily basis is a very different landscape out here. And I realize it's because the ocean's not static. It's constantly, you know, coming up in varying degrees of strength and, you know, wave after wave of water and, you know, just different experiences here. And it's really, really amazing. You know, so I realize, you know, the ocean isn't static. Nature isn't static at all. And so therefore the landscape's continuously changing. And to tie into what I wanted to share with you here today is very similar. Your life and my life is not static. It's only when the stories that you and I continue to tell ourselves are static that we continue to stagnate in what our life might look like, because life wants to change, life wants to evolve. There's an impulse within inside, you know, nature. There's an impulse within inside you and I that constantly wants to expand, it wants to grow. And then there's these narratives that I can tell you in my past that I have continued to tell myself, even up until recently, that continues to want to stagnate my life. It's the stories that stagnate the landscape. So it's why so many people that I've worked with personally, I've noticed that they continue to create the same thing over and over, both in their businesses and their personal lives. It's the narrative, it's the stories that continue to shelter the shame that we have, you know, as a species, and even as myself, you know, have continued to tell myself. Welcome, Cynthia, my lady. Glad you're here. Welcome. So just like the ocean isn't static, neither should our lives be, and neither should the stories that we continue to tell ourselves. Because the more that I have discovered that I tell myself the same stories over and over, the more that I might perpetuate certain shames in my life that I've experienced. And I'm sorry I have found more people that have adopted shameful stories than I have found people that haven't. And the few people that haven't that I've come across do extremely well, in their relationships, in their businesses, in their health. And it's generally the people, some of them I've invested with especially, that I have discovered what is that stream of consciousness that goes through their lives? What is that thing that's similar? And what I've discovered is that, if they do have shameful stories or shame, it's the story that they've told themselves around it that they don't take so darn serious. And I notice that they're able to lean into life with a lot more leniency, both around themselves and their abilities to withstand mistakes. Angela Darling, I'm not calling you darling, I just know it's your last name, and welcome. Glad to see you here. So, I had this concept that I really wanted to share this week, that, over the past couple of weeks, I have been working with a lot of people that have been, that I've noticed have had this thread of shame around money, sexuality, relationships. And, I have, in the past, I've struggled with all of them. And, shameful thoughts and stories around money, shameful thoughts around sex, as a man, something that can be very, very damaging. Really around it, whether you're male or female, but certainly it has created a lot of turmoil, both in my life and my personal life, my relationships, and, especially money. Money has always been, I've always said, if you really want to find out about money, if you really want to get real around it, start some kind of business, because it will put a magnifying glass on all the areas that you and I might have constraints around. I'm not saying everybody needs to start a business. I'm just saying, if you've started a business, you know what I'm talking about. It will reveal, there's no hiding around, having a business and money, because money is nothing more than a measurement. A lot of people go, oh, well, you're just driven by money. And no, money is just nothing more than a measurement of the amount of meaning that you have around it. And, it also reveals the meaning that you've assigned it. And I can tell you, there has been many, many, many times I've struggled with money around the accumulation of it, not able to manage my emotions around it, making it mean something more than it's not. When I got married, I've been divorced now since 2005, but when I got married, actually probably about 2 years before her and I had ever met, I had wrote what kind of woman that I wanted to be with and the qualities. It was funny because I had told myself I wanted to be with a woman that I could make the money and she would take care of it. And you got to be careful what you ask for, because I got it. And to this day, she was amazing with money and, helped me get out of a lot of debt. And, she was very, very astute with it. But there was a lot of other areas in that relationship that I didn't call in, because whenever you call something in and you're not very, very specific about all of what it is that you're calling in, you got to be careful, because you'll get other stuff with that. And I did. Ultimately, that marriage didn't work out, and I take full responsibility. But coming out of that marriage, I carried a lot of shame, very destructive shame, matter of fact. My divorce was final in 2005. By 2010, I would say, I was still struggling with the story of shame. I was still walking around in the shadow of shame. And, for many, many reasons, I had told myself that I would never, that I would get married once and that was it. I wasn't going to be a statistic. I'd watched my great-grandparents, who I was raised by. I saw them married for 30-some-odd years, 35 years, I think it was, and it was their second marriage, both of them. The only reason that they had, my great-grandmother got married again was because her husband had accidentally shot herself in a hunting accident. And so they had been married for a really long time. So you kind of got to see, like, my paradigm was, wow, like, you're in a relationship, like, you're in it to win it, right? You're in it and you stay there. And, which might not have been the greatest paradigm, but, it wasn't horrible either. But I can tell you that coming out of that divorce, I carried a lot of shame, and there were moments where I had burnt my life down to the ground, literally. I can tell you there was a month where I couldn't afford, anything more than about a 39-cent Pop-Tart for the day. That's about what I ate for like a month. And it wasn't because I wasn't capable, and it wasn't because I wasn't able, it was because I wasn't willing, because I'd carried so much shame that the deservingness that I had designed for myself was very, very small. And so, I lived a very tight life in a very tight world. And, I burnt my credit to the ground. I burnt my finances to the ground. I burnt a lot of the relationships that I had down to the ground. Fortunately, I turned this woe into a win by all means. And, when I talk about this idea of turning shame into shine, I'm not saying that you have to go through what I did in order to really figure it out, in order to transition and to change. But I think it's important to understand, why it happens. I think that, the shame is nothing more than a shadow of the story that I had painted myself into and that I had made reality. I had assigned it that meaning, and that, that I wasn't enough, that I was a bad person, and I took a lot of this very, very seriously. As one of my coaches, mentors, Travis, would tell me, it's just, you give things way too much meaning, assign way too much meaning to things. And, but the thing is, and I really want to make this point, I've talked about, like why shame comes up, why it happens. It's because of the stories that we tell and that we stay stagnant in and continue to tell ourselves. What is shame? Shame is defined by Brené Brown, which I love, if you haven't read her book, The Gift of Imperfection, which is really all around shame. The difference of guilt and shame is guilt is something that you've done. Shame is who you are, which is where, I learned this concept years ago, and one of my mentors, Travis, shared a little bit deeper inside of this, which I want to share with you, is that, when you experience shame, it's an identity. It's about who you are. And the funny thing about it is, though, is that, when I had studied shadow work and learned it and had been working with it and actually even sharing it with other people, that identity, it's about the totality of who you are. And the beauty of this is that you're one person with many, many selves. If you don't believe me, take a look. You're probably either a daughter, a sister, a brother, a son, a father, a boss, right? You've got all of these different roles in your life, and you show up differently in all of them in a lot of ways. Not that you're incongruent. Matter of fact, you're very, very congruent. How I show up with some of my best friends might be different than how I might show up with my mom to some degree. But I have many, many roles, and so do you. And I think what's important is that when a particular role is struggling, that what happens is at least with me in the past, I have made that role my entire identity. And it is very destructive because it's not who you are. It's just one aspect of you. It's just one particular piece or role that you show up in with life. So, for an example, I was working with somebody, who is learning marketing. And I don't call myself a marketer. I don't call myself a copywriter. I don't really like any of those labels. It's just, I don't like to be defined in that way. But when I'm teaching one of my experts or my coaches, I'm helping them to understand that they're taking on a role as a marketer. And I have to redefine what marketer is, what that means, because otherwise they might assign some of their old stories to that. Like, marketing is something shitty that you do to people, and it's not. To me, marketing is a meaningful way to deeply connect with people and offer them solutions if they want it, right? It's a very, very, very different reframe when you start to look at it that way. So when you look at your role maybe as a wife or, as a mother, as a sister, whatever that role might be, does that role always have room for improvement, quote unquote? Probably. Sure it does. I think it always means that you and I can be more efficient communicators, better listeners, I think, if anything. That's why I always say God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, so that way when you do talk, you say something meaningful to the other person, to the other party. I think it's really, really important. I think there's one skill that we all could benefit from is actually listening. I think that goes anywhere from personal relationships to politics, and I just don't know that there's enough listening going on. And the same can be said for yourself when you are going through those moments where you're shaming yourself for behaviors or for things that you may have done that role might have shown up as. And rather than assigning it to your whole identity, and like I did, burning your entire life to the ground, not once, but probably 2 or 3 times, you start to ease up on yourself. You start to realize that, you're taking some thoughts way seriously. And I think that what happens is for me, when I talk about this, how to eliminate shame, really all it is just a different reframe around, what is this role? How does this role happen to be showing up right now? I learned this when I was in shadow work and really, really focused on shadow work and realizing that, and I think it was maybe Carl Jung that had said it, we're one person with many, many selves. And so what happens is it gives you and I a lot more leniency. And listen, I am by no means perfect at practicing this. I'm pretty darn good at picking it up, though, and observing it within both my friends, my clients. It's why it's weird. Like a lot of my friends, my close friends, they'll come to me and they ask for me for relationship advice, and how to deepen relationships. And, maybe it's because, I haven't had a really close family upbringing that the friends and the people that I am close with, I'm super close with because I do my best to listen. I like for the people that I'm close to feel heard, because I know, that's definitely one of my things is I like to be heard. I like to be seen. And I don't mean that in a narcissistic way, but it's just, I think you might know what I mean, in the sense of, knowing that people deeply see you for who you are. And I think the more that we can shed light on shame and not live in the shadow, I think the more real you and I can be. I think the more alive, we'll end up being. I think that, and really deeply feel it, that the more real you are, the more permission you give people around you to be who they are. And it's just one of those things that it's one person like myself maybe sharing, some of this story, sharing, my ability to let go of a lot of the shame, to give other people permission that might be watching this, and hopefully maybe you share this if it's important enough, because I really feel like if you want to create more congruent relationships in your life, you've got to start with ourselves and being real with ourselves and letting go of the shame and letting go of the stagnant stories that continue to create the same landscape. And if you don't like the landscape you've been living, then chances are, I can tell you, life is always growing, life is always evolving, it's always progressing. I was talking with a good friend of mine yesterday, talking about, how some, abandoned cities, you can see that after a while, that life just keeps on growing. You can see the plants growing up through the concrete, right? And you can definitely tell that life continues to move on. But it's just so funny how we as a species, as human beings, that we can just continue to tell ourselves the same story that creates this stagnant energy in our lives, and we continue to create what it is that we say that we don't want. Little kids like that, they don't give a shit. They're gone. Look at it. That's life for you, right? Just got to progress. Just got to go on. So, what do you do at this point? Tony, I don't have shame. Great. That's awesome. If you have nothing in your life that you're shameful about, that doesn't dictate the stories that you tell yourself, kudos. Congratulations to you. And if you do, just be real with yourself. I think, one of the best practices I did years ago was sit down and, write down the things about my life that I did not like. Actually, back then I was in a really bad state, so I wrote down the things that I hated. And, those 10 things that I hated, I was able to very articulately detail out, because my brain is, like most human brains, we are very, very good at identifying what we don't want. It takes a little more work to identify what it is that we do want, or that we're willing to call in, I like to say. Because I think that everything we want is already waiting. It's just waiting for us to give up our woes and step into our wisdom. And I truly believe that. And it's kind of like, a lot of, me doing a lot more of these style type videos. It just so happens I've been sharing a lot of these concepts and ideas with entrepreneurs that I work with, and really just providing them, ways of eliminating the constraint that's going on within themselves and inside their businesses. Don't have the ability to let go and hire help. Well, guess what? Where inside are you not willing to receive help? What part of you, what aspect of you is not willing to ask for help or not willing to receive it? And I really believe that that's, something that goes on inside and it manifests outside, right? It's all based on decision. It's all based on choice. And I just really have felt like life is a deeply, deeply felt decision that you and I make. And I think if we come down to making and taking responsibility, right? The ability to respond, right? Responsibility is able to respond rather than react to life. Then money, sex, relationships, these are some very, very highly charged topics. All of them I have fucked up. All of them I have abused at some point, if I'm really, really honest, because I was in a pretty abusive relationship with myself. And it wasn't until I got really, really just honest with myself. Some people would say, "Oh, Tony, why are you sharing this stuff publicly?" Because I'm at the point I don't really give a shit. I think the more light that I'm able to shine on the areas of shit that I have been able to transform, the shinier that it's become, the more I'm able to receive, the less charge there is around it for me. And I think that the less taboo this stuff is, that the more room there is for each and every one of us to grow, and each and every one of us to receive and create a larger container for ourselves and for the people around us. People are starving for that, I hate to say this word, authenticity, right? People are starving for it. And I don't know that it's necessarily that we see it in other people so much as that the gift is seeing within ourselves, giving it to ourselves, gifting it to ourselves, and just walking into it. Because it's already there and it's waiting. It's just, again, waiting for us to give up our woes, step into our wisdom. And that's the win, right? It's not a whole lot of work, I think, that one has to go through and do all of this. Just, can you stop telling yourself the story? And I think even more powerful than just stopping, telling yourself the story. I was telling a good friend of mine, I think it was this morning, maybe it was yesterday, best way to create, to get rid of new habits is just to create new ones. So do I think that you have to go through all of this deep, deep work and quote unquote unfuck yourself? I don't know. I think, people are complex. Some people might, some people won't. Mike Wadden. If I'm saying your name wrong, Wadden, is it Wadden or Wadden? You have to correct me next time we talk, brother. We got to catch up. Glad to see you here. Do I think you have to go through and do all of that deep, deep work and identify all that? Maybe not. Maybe sometimes it's just a matter of saying, you know what, I want to create a new story today. And, realizing that I am not my emotions. I had a really good conversation with somebody this past week where, it's like they're really good at identifying their emotions, but not very efficient at working through them. And I want to give you a really cool resource. I think I might have talked about this before. Really close friend of mine at one point shared this with me. It's called the inner bonding process. It's probably one of the fastest, most efficient ways of just really being able to identify what's going on, when it comes to your feelings, quote unquote. I'm fortunately surrounded with some really important people that have helped me realize that I'm not the totality of what I feel. Usually when I feel something, it's, probably the thought has already happened, so it's too late to correct it necessarily, but what we can do is just move through it and not resist, because it will persist, as I believe Debbie Ford has said before. What you can't be with won't let you be. I keep saying those things because it's so very, very true. At least it has been for me. There are some people that have built up the mental and emotional fortitude to be able to be very, very proactive and not succumb to their emotions, or if they do have those emotional experiences, what they do is they just realize that that's only a role. It's not their entire identity, and they move through it very, very quickly and efficiently. and they don't assign a lot of meaning to it. And I can't take credit for this. One of my mentors, Travis Sago, shared that particular idea with me, and it's something that, you know, I've been deeply integrating over the years that I've been working with them. And at the same time, you know, it also marries very well into the understanding and the idea of shadow, and realizing that shame is nothing more than, you know, the sheltering of shadow. And shadow is just simply not being with what is. And so, you know, for me, shame is just nothing more than a story that I've told myself that I have created around the totality of who I am, and it's not true. Your many roles, your many selves, but you're all love, right? And I think the minute that we popped out here into this world, you know, as Travis would say, we have won. And it's just remembering that we won, and not living with layers of lies that we have told ourselves while we're here. So with that, as you can see, we're having some fun here. Lots of folks playing out here in the water. It's a pretty gorgeous day. It was raining here a little while ago. So what do you do with all of this now? You know, I've talked a little bit about, you know, why it's important, you know, the costs and the benefits of, you know, just realizing what shame is, and how you can begin to start to move through shame, realizing that it's just one aspect of yourself. It's not the totality of yourself. What do you do? Well, kind of preface this a little bit already is, you know, as you're moving forward here today, and you start to identify, start to realize, whoa, wait a minute, you know, I'm shaming myself right now. How do you know you're shaming? Well, you're saying, I should do this. I ought to have done this. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. I oughtn't have done this, right? Like, and you start to have this tonality of this voice in your mind that is telling you that you're bad, you're wrong, you shouldn't have done this. And you just have to stop yourself and pause. Because chances are, if you're watching this, I think you're a pretty awesome human being. We're all fallible. We're all capable of making mistakes. It's just a matter of not identifying our totality with that. So I would probably support you. Woo! Here we go. And I would probably support you in, you know, one tool is like inner bonding process, where you can just catch yourself. It's a really short little, you know, 5 or 6 steps that you can do, and they're very, very quick. I find myself doing them often this past week. You know, just identifying like where am I trying to shame myself? You know, is that particularly true? Or you can even, another great resource is Katie Byron's, you know, 4 questions. And you can Google that as well. If you have any interest, let me know. I'll post down below where you can get this stuff. But Dr. Margaret Paul, her inner bonding process, Katie Byron, the 4 questions, any one of these are going to be very, very powerful little tools in order to catch yourself. And eventually what will end up happening is, like some of the people that I'm around, you know, you don't even really find yourself terribly going into these, you know, being sheltered by these particular shadows, and you don't really start to feel any more of the shame. What ends up happening is you start to live a more emotionally free life, right? I don't think we're ever going to be free of emotions, but what you do become is free of those emotions that tend to slow you down, tend to not really feel good all the time. You don't feel controlled by them so much, because you begin to start to manage your emotions rather than be affected. And that way you can become informed. So hopefully this has been a little helpful to you. If it hasn't, tough shit. I'm just kidding. Probably has. If you have any questions, feel free to share below, and I'll pop on here a little bit later and get with those. But hopefully this has been helpful to you. I know it's been extremely helpful to me over the past couple of years, especially over this past year. And I see some really, really amazing things happening, you know, moving forward as we're in this moment. So with that, I hope you're having an incredible Saturday, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.